So I would encourage people to, if you have a strong preference for a given diet that you like or that helps you maintain healthy body weight, I encourage you to try to work with that, but make it flexible, play with it. What I would advise a lot of caution is these myths that the risk factors don't apply to you. Your blood pressure is sky high, but don't worry because you're on this diet. Your ApoB is sky high. Don't worry, you're on diet XYZ. This stuff, I've heard every flavor of this story, and it never pans out. This is
No.
always a trap. And
Yeah.
if you look into it, when influencers pitch this fairy tale, it never has substance. You look at the studies they're talking about, they misunderstood it. They're citing the wrong thing. The study they're talking about contradicts their own story. Like it's crazy. Diet flexibility, yes, and it can be powerful and it can be helpful. Myths about the risk factor that you have sky high and your doctor is worried, ignore everyone. All scientists are wrong. The risk factor doesn't apply to you. Be extremely careful about that.
Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, epigenetic human performance coach. This is where we discuss all things lifestyle, environment, food, exercise, work, mind, and social interaction as they pertain to epigenetic expression in a way that's relatable to everyone. So if you're ready to start viewing you as an individual, take control of your life and health, and get results, buckle up, here we go.
Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, and this is the place where we talk about everything lifestyle and environment and how it relates to our genetic expression. And today I am so excited. I have waited for this guest. I had to wait 3 months for him to come on. I found Dr. Gil Carvalho on YouTube trying to find some research on some of these crazy things I hear on social media posts through influencers, doctors, and I'm going, this isn't right. Why am I the only one saying this? And when I found him, he puts things in just a really easy to understand way, because I am not the deep dive science long attention span person. I need to know information. How do I use it? How do I best use it for me? How do I best use it for clients? And move on. And he just makes everything so easy to understand. And today we're going to talk about debunking some of the things we're hearing out there, that it's really bad information that's harming some people. And it drives me crazy. I'm ending up fixing the people that are trying to follow this bad information. And so I want to bring to all of you some sanity in this influencer. What's the word I'm looking for? That where everyone has an agenda. And this man, Gil, has no agenda other than to get the truth out. And that's what I so love about listening to him. So Gil Carvalho, he is a physician, a research scientist, a science communicator known for his work in nutrition, longevity, and evidence-based health education. He earned his MD from the University of Lisbon in Portugal, and then, because you must have needed something else to do, got another PhD in biology from Caltech, where he trained under pioneering geneticist Seymour Benzer. His research spans genetics, molecular biology, nutrition, behavior, aging, neuroscience, and contributions including the identification of genetic and nutritional mechanisms underlying longevity. Now you all see why I wanted him on here and why I gel with him. His work has been cited. Now, this is as of 2023. His work had been cited over 4,130 times. He's collaborated with neuroscientists. He has, my gosh, in addition to his academic career at Cal, he's the founder of the YouTube channel that he has, where I found him, called Nutrition Made Simple. And it is made simple. That started in 2018, and he has amassed over 1 million monthly viewers. Tell me your secret, brother. By simplifying complex dietary science for lay audiences. So I just felt like he was a perfect fit for this program. And I am so grateful that he has agreed to come on. And I will tell you, it is 0 dark 30 where he is right now. So I'm giving just an extra applause to him and gratitude for him spending his time coming on here. So welcome, 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 Gil.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. My pleasure. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, the first one we're going to do. Oh, it was last month or a few weeks ago. I did my own podcast because I couldn't find anybody that didn't have an agenda to come on and talk about lipids, because we keep hearing all the information put out there now is the higher cholesterol, the better. If you've got cholesterol in the 400s, doesn't matter. We need it to make hormones. And they're citing a very specific study where, and you had talked about it on your YouTube channel, where low cholesterol is a higher mortality risk. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let me tell you what actually went on in that study and why it looked this way. So, can you help me debunk this craziness that's being put out there of the higher the better with cholesterol, and there is no bad cholesterol? Ooh.
Okay, so you touched on a couple of things there. One is the hormones, and the other the mortality, the risk, the association with higher death. We'll do each one real quick, and then you tell me if you want more detail.
Okay.
But so the hormones side, our body and the glands that produce hormones, those cells produce their own cholesterol. So cells throughout your body produce their own cholesterol, right? Tip of your finger, in your arm, and on your face. All of these cells produce their own cholesterol inside. That's a separate world from the amount of cholesterol traveling inside our blood vessels. So the confusion that people often make is they conflate everything. People think of cholesterol as being one pool throughout the body, but that's not how the body works, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. Glucose, right? The body contains glucose. It's fundamental. Like if you didn't have any glucose in your body, you'd be dead. But in the blood, you don't want it too high. That's called diabetes. So levels in the blood are one compartment, and then normal levels inside cells throughout the body, a different compartment. And then even within the cells, you can talk about brain levels versus other. So there's different compartments that this all works in quite a controlled manner. So there's a physiological range for these things. Long story short, the glands that produce our hormones, they produce their own cholesterol. For the most part, that's enough. If they need some extra cholesterol, they can get it from these tiny vehicles that travel in the bloodstream that we call lipoproteins that carry different types of lipids like cholesterol and others. But they can get them from all types of lipoproteins, like HDL lipoproteins, for example, and they can get some from LDL lipoproteins, but you don't need your cholesterol and the number of those vehicles to be sky high for those glands. So there's no need. We have genetic studies of people who have the levels of these things much lower than the average person, abnormally low. They have no developmental problems. They have no issues producing hormones. So that's essentially a myth. Now we have the mortality question, which is a little different. You referred to a study. There's actually a number of studies out there. Basically, it's the observation that when you take a population, you look for example, at everyone in a given country or 100,000 people in a given region, and you measure their cholesterol level, and you also record their chance of dying. What you often find is there's what we call a U-shaped curve. So for very high cholesterol levels, you will see a higher chance of dying. Then for intermediate, you'll find a low chance of dying. But then for low cholesterol levels, it goes up again. So people tend to die more when they have these very low levels, which are levels that actually are recommended, usually in general, that are considered healthy levels. So this is a very confusing finding. Why are these people with healthy cholesterol dying more? Is having normal cholesterol killing you? What happens with these studies, they're looking at a correlation between things, right? Cholesterol levels go down in old age, in the last couple decades of life. They also go down with a number of chronic diseases. So if you have cancer, for example, if you have chronic infections, if you have liver disease, these things tend to drop your cholesterol level. It's not unique to cholesterol, by the way. A number of other metrics also. Your blood pressure tends to come down with those chronic diseases as well. Your BMI tends to come down for different reasons, malnutrition, just being sick, you tend to lose body mass. And so your glucose often will come down as well. So you'll see this correlation. As the cholesterol is coming down in very old age or someone who has these chronic diseases, and correlates with a higher risk of death because the person is very old and or has these diseases. So it creates this correlation. It looks like if you only look at cholesterol level at death, it looks like they're tied. They're tied correlationally, but it's not cause and effect. And the way we know that is if you actually lower people's cholesterol, either with medication or you look at people who have genetically determined lower cholesterol level, they don't die more. If anything, they die less. So it's a very interesting example of cause and effect and the type of evidence that gives us that, and then a correlation that can be misleading and understandably it can send us in the wrong direction. But once we understand that, it's not that hard to comprehend.
And it wasn't. As soon as I heard you talk about that on your show, I was like, wait a minute, this makes sense because I've been sitting here saying, I know what I see clinically. And my people with the very high cholesterol have issues. I have yet to see someone with very high cholesterol because I'll do the deeper dive and there we'll see almost every single time when there is very high cholesterol, there is either high apolipoprotein B to accompany the basic cholesterol and or LPA almost every time, or those particle sizes, the LDL particle sizes, the small are elevated. The particle numbers, I've seen them almost 3,000 on one person. And they're told it's okay, go carnivore, stay carnivore. I'm going and just eat meat and butter all day. It's maddening because that's the information that's put out there. So when this study came out, this was just a few months back, this was all the rage that every influencer that's pro keto, carnivore, these very high saturated fat diets where we see the cholesterol numbers raising up. And they're saying, don't worry about it. Don't look at cholesterol. No, I don't like to look at just cholesterol. I want to look at everything attached to it. Like you said, the lipoproteins. That's where we're seeing what's actually happening with those base numbers. Like, right? So to just look and glance at that study and go, oh, look at this. Low cholesterol. You're gonna die with lower cholesterol. And you're like, no, these are generally people that are already sick. And it was the low cholesterol did not cause the illness or what's killing them. It's a byproduct of that, right, or the age or whatever it may be in that case. Thank you.
Just to add some more context, the problem is that cholesterol itself, the level of cholesterol in the blood, is a dirty metric, right? It's not a fantastic reflection of heart disease risk. So it gives you the first pass. But like you said, and this can mismatch with the number of the lipoproteins quite often, depending on the population. And so just understanding that the cholesterol level gives you sometimes it gives you a red flag to dig deeper, to investigate deeper. Sometimes it gets it wrong. So understanding that cholesterol is not the end all and be all, but we also don't want to completely dismiss it. If you have a very high cholesterol level, you want to investigate deeper. You don't want to just sweep it under the rug because there could be a real issue there. And yeah, like you said, ApoB, and there are some other metrics that are trying to be surrogates of ApoB because not everybody has an ApoB reading. It's another extra test. So there are ways to calculate ApoB from your regular lipid panel. There's like a whole formula that you can do that. I have a video on that, like a longer formula, but there's a way to do that for free where you can estimate it. LPA is another that I know you talk about. Yeah. That is an independent risk factor. It's a type of lipoprotein, but just by measuring your cholesterol, you can't really tell if your LPA is high or not. And 1 in 5 people, depending on the ethnicity, African Americans even higher, up to 1 in 3 people can have this elevated. So these are things that you want to look at With LPA, it's determined genetically, so looking at it once in life is usually considered fine. With ApoB, it can vary more. But so, yeah, these are things to bring up. Ask your doctor. If you're being followed by a cardiologist, then they'll be more knowledgeable about these things as well. But yeah, these are things that are important to be familiar with.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, because I run that. These are standard ones that I request to get run. And it never has proven me wrong. And I'll tell you, just to add on, like on my lab panel, just to add apolipoprotein B, $17. It's
Yeah,
not expensive to run these. The LPA is like, I think it's right around that same range. And the NMR profile with the particle, the lipoprotein fractionation particle sizes is $50 because I just ran two lipid panels, those advanced lipid panels, and they were like $85. So it's to be, and they were all very high risk, yet their
right,
cholesterol looked pretty normal. It was one was like
right.
219, the other was in the 190s. So their
Yeah,
doctor doesn't look twice at it. Or the other thing I'll see is, oh, your HDL, which people say is the quote good cholesterol. Oh, your HDL, it's at 70, you're protected, you're fine. No, I've seen that. So it's these just broad statements and these quick glances that are really hurting people. And so I'm seeing clients that I'm saying are literally like walking risks for cardiovascular events and have so
yeah,
much inflammation because we're seeing the CRP is elevated, homocysteine can be elevated, especially if you have variants around MTHFR. There's and that's why even doing like the DNA tests that are like 5 SNPs on methylation, you're missing out on all of this very impactful, valuable information that people
yeah,
need to know because the body is such a complex system.
yeah.
So while we're on the topic of lipids, and I went into a bit about the carnivore and keto, and these people, I have one client, she was carnivore for the last year, and it was not right for her. Again, we're talking lipids, insulin resistance because of several genetics there, TCF7L2. So lots of IL-6, TNF alpha, lots of different things playing in here. And she said, I can't tell my carnivore friends because they're gonna like excoriate me, right? So they're like, these people become rabid for their beliefs that everybody needs this. And people are afraid to even say, I went off carnivore and I'm eating vegetables and I'm fruit and I'm thriving. What the hell? So now we have this about the saturated fat, and we see it has come into the new food pyramid. However, they like, and I was listening to this on yours, that their RFK Jr. was actually talking about we should eat more saturated fats, but yet you're like, you know what? It didn't change on the food pyramid. It's still about 10%, which is what we really say is about the safe amount. And it wouldn't be safe for somebody like me with an ApoE4. I need to be closer to 5% to really watch that. So talk a bit, if you would, about some of the myths around this high saturated fat intake being the best thing out there and that it's really safe for everybody.
So there's a little bit of nuance here, just like with the cholesterol story. There's a little bit of nuance that often is used to confuse people because there's different types of saturated fat, right? It gets a little more complicated, but not everyone is problematic. So dark chocolate is the famous example that contains quite high in saturated fat, but it's a specific type called stearic acid that doesn't raise risk of heart disease. And if, in fact, most of the evidence for dark chocolate actually suggests that it might be cardioprotective. It might be good for your
Wow.
heart.
Did not know this.
That's dark chocolate. Yeah, dark chocolate without sugar added, ideally, or low in sugar. Just a cocoa as high as possible. Usually 70% or higher in
70s.
cocoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's different types of saturated fat, and so this often gets complicated, and people just give up and go eat whatever they like. The bottom line, the way I summarize this is eat to your blood work. Exactly what we were talking about a minute ago, because this also varies from person to person. So if your ApoB and all these things, and if your glucose levels, your blood pressure, if all these things look great, I'm a lot less worried about you having a bit more meat or whatever, or a bit more butter in your diet. And then the guy next to you that is more careful, but his numbers are a nightmare. I'm more worried about that guy. So it's genetics are not fair, and we're not all built exactly the same. And some people just need to be more careful than others. And just to give my personal example, I'm pretty darn careful because although my cholesterol is not bad, is pretty good with lifestyle, I can dial it in. But I have that LPA that runs in my family, pretty high. It's about 2 to almost 3 times the threshold runs.
Wow.
I was the first one to find. This is also an interesting kind of story that is common to a lot of my viewers. So I ran the test. I found that I had it elevated. Then what you do, because it's genetically determined, you do what we call cascade screening. So you start testing your family, right? Because usually it'll be siblings and parents and stuff. So I tested my mom, one of her kind of routine tests. I snuck in LPA, exactly my level, right? So I knew it came.
Really?
So it came from that side. So I didn't know if it was mom or dad. I suspected it was her because of some more family history of cardiovascular disease on her side. So I tested her, exact same level. Then I let my siblings know. My sisters all got tested. One of my sisters, exactly the same level up there. Another sister, perfectly normal LPA. So it's that deck the cards get dealt in different ways. And then I now let everybody know, uncles and cousins, and everybody's testing for LPA. Just to go back to because I have that LPA, I'm more careful, right? I'm trying to get the ApoB, the blood pressure, the glucose levels, the insulin resistance, everything really dialed in, really controlled to lower overall risk. Because the LPA, there's nothing known that will normalize a high LPA. There are therapies being studied, but nothing currently that we know of that will normalize that. So the approach is to just dial everything else really nicely so your overall risk is as low as possible. So that's to give an example. So I'm pretty strict. I avoid butter and fatty meats and things like that. Another interesting example is coconut oil, which is
Yes.
also high in saturated fat. And it's surprising to a lot of people because it comes from a vegetable, obviously, comes
Mhm.
from a plant. And people often think saturated fat is animal fat, it's butter, it's lard. But coconut oil is actually higher in saturated fat than butter.
100%.
Palm oil, palm oil is
Yes.
higher than butter typically. It's not just animal fats, it's fats that are the easiest way to recognize is fats that are solid at room temperature. So if it's an oil, it's typically lower in saturated fat. If it's solid, like coconut oil, you spoon it, right? Or
Yep.
butter or lard at room temperature, it'll be solid.
It's
So that's
solid.
how you
Yeah.
distinguish. And even there, you can find nuance because butter isn't 100% saturated fat. It's about 60 to 70%. So it's a mix of types of fats, but it's a food that's going to be a higher concentration of saturated fat. And so, in general, for most people, it's going to tend to raise these ApoB type markers.
Yeah.
So, that's a little bit of a nuance and a little bit of like personalization as well.
No, I love that. And some similar stuff on my end. Now I have had issues. I'm an ApoE4, so I have some issues with it there. I also have a variant with the apolipoprotein B, and it has shown up. Things have appeared in my labs as well. And I was paleo, hardcore
Mm.
paleo. I coached it for my first 4 years coaching, and I followed it for 10 years. And I tell people, Gil, I was going and eating like a spoonful of coconut oil. I was doing fat bombs that were coconut oil balls with shredded coconut. I'm going, I did this for how many years? But look at how the body bounces back, right? I took my particle sizes, my LDL particle numbers from 1886, 1 October, to under 800 by the next October, just
Mhm.
by swapping those things out. This is what our bodies do when we stop feeding it crap that it doesn't process. And yeah, now that I have clients that don't have the genetics around any of this, and they are eating, they're living generally a pretty healthy lifestyle. These are some of my people that just need to optimize. And so they can have that butter on there, not eating, I kid you not. A client I had that came to me was eating nothing but ribeyes and sticks of butter. and wondered why the cholesterol was up near 500. And it's just insane. Why would you want to just live on that anyway? That would just take all the joy of food for me. I love a ribeye. So, and like you said, we get very, very careful. I am super careful with how I eat too. Now, I did have a ribeye from Butcher Box that was left, and it's been sitting in my freezer for 2 months. And I look at it every time I open the freezer. I'm like, that looks really good, but it's today to the day. Yesterday was finally the day. So we just become more choosy. And then when you do choose to eat something that is going to be, say you want that steak, make it good quality, enjoy it, take it in. You don't need to have that several times a week to feed this. So thank you for talking about the saturated fat, because I did not know that about chocolate. Now I'm going to have a bunch of people emailing me, my clients, saying, does that mean chocolate's going to come back in my profile and I can eat this now?
It's
So
dark
thank you
chocolate, though, right? It's not
yeah.
candy bars that are, yeah, the problem is the additives. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Protein bars are some of the worst.
it depends
Chocolate.
on the composition, but they're usually very high in sugar. We have a video that we're editing where we looked at a number of protein bars, and some of these bars, there's like a Gatorade bar that they market heavily as a protein bar, but then you look at it, there's more sugar than protein in it, and
Oh
just
my God.
added sugar. So it's really a candy bar, but they market it as like a health sports
Yeah.
food. It's not. It's nonsense.
No, they're
Um,
just junk. It's
but
just another candy
it's
bar.
all marketing.
So
I wanted to just on the topic of the different diets. I'm actually of the view, and the more I learn and the more I talk to people, the more I have this view that you can have a variety of diets. So we don't have to tell someone, look, oh, you are low carb, wrong. You have to stop being low carb, or you're a vegan, wrong. You can most people, let's put it that way, can be on these different variants and tweak it to their needs and probably be pretty healthy. So if they love eating a low carb diet or a paleo diet or a vegan diet or a pescatarian, whatever, most of these diets can be tuned up to fit personal needs. Just like you said, and we were saying, eat to your blood work, and you gave the perfect example. You brought your risk factor down by 2 or 3 fold. That's what I mean. So I would encourage people to, if you have a strong preference for a given diet that you like or that helps you maintain healthy body weight, I encourage you to try to work with that, but make it flexible, play with it. What I would advise a lot of caution is these myths that the risk factors don't apply to you. Your blood pressure is sky high, but don't worry because you're on this diet. Your ApoB is sky high. Don't worry, you're on diet XYZ. This stuff, I've heard every uh, flavor of this story, and it never pans out. This is
no.
always a trap. And
Yeah.
if you look into it, when influencers pitch this fairy tale, it never has substance. You look at the studies they're talking about, they misunderstood it. They're citing the wrong thing. The study they're talking about contradicts their own story. Like it's crazy. Diet flexibility, yes, and it can be powerful and it can be helpful. Myths about the risk factor that you have sky high and your doctor is worried, ignore everyone. All scientists are wrong. The risk factor doesn't apply to you. Be extremely careful about that.
This is one of the reasons I do this podcast, is so people can become their own best medical advocate. Because the more you understand about you, and that's why I do what I do, is so people can understand how they are, why they are, what's getting them where they are, so that when they go to the doctor and the doctor starts to, for lack of a better word, fight back or push back, because they are driven by insurance, right? With what they're allowed to do a lot of the time, you need to stand up for yourself and say, no, this is what I need. And if that doesn't work, go find somebody else that's going to help you. But you don't have to just say, okay, I'm going to lower my head and just bow to the doctor because they have a degree, and just say that's okay, even though I know that I don't feel well. And I've put this out. I've had Lyme disease. It took 11 years to diagnose me. I went to every specialist because the first time I got it twice. The first time was all cardiac symptoms, and the second time was more of the musculoskeletal. So a lot of the horrible joint pain. So I had all these crazy different symptoms over a 6-year period between the two. And then they started to merge. So nobody could figure out what was wrong. And they just said, and I said, I'm gaining weight. Like all these things are happening. Oh, you're going to be fine. Just keep working out. You'll lose the weight. Your heart looks fine. And you're going, but I know I don't feel good. Why won't someone listen to me? And so I think people just need to understand themselves and where they are so that they can advocate for that. So I love that you talked about that. The next one I want to go to, because this one really hit me, and I actually saw Mark Hyman's post on Instagram and then saw your video not long after that saying, yeah, I debunk what Mark Hyman just said. And this was about how the worst breakfast you can have is oats. And I thought, holy hell, I have many clients that actually thrive on oats for breakfast. Their labs look great, they feel amazing. So, why is it the worst? And why should eggs be the be all end all for everybody? Because they're not for everyone. So, you debunked that, and I would love for you to talk a bit about that.
Sure. So that specific video that we did, actually a viewer sent that to me because I didn't see that. A viewer sent me that video. It was a short clip of Mark Hyman
Yep.
on Dr. Hyman. I don't know him in person. I contacted him to try to get him to talk about it, but we didn't hear back. So we went ahead with the fact check. But this was a clip of Dr. Hyman on a podcast talking about a study that showed purportedly that oatmeal is the worst breakfast you can have, and you have to eat eggs, and you have to start your day with fat and protein. And then I simply looked at the study, I dug it up, and it's a study that is not looking at oatmeal versus eggs at all. It's a study looking at something called glycemic index. It's just how much of a meal or a food will affect your glucose level after in the acute stage. So there were complex meals with lots of components. And the one that had the oats had some sugar added to it, some dextrose, which is basically glucose added to it. And the one that contained the eggs had no sugar added, but it had an enormous amount of vegetables and 200 grams of spinach. Like it was massive amounts of vegetables. And so the majority of the calories in that meal weren't from eggs at all. The eggs were in there definitely, but it was like maybe a third of the calories. So the what they actually did and what was presented on that podcast was night and day. So we basically just went over the claims on the podcast, and then we showed on the study dramatically different what the scientists were actually saying. Now, as a more general point, I think, and I've seen a lot of these videos or posts saying oatmeal is terrible for you, oatmeal is going to cause disease, is going to cause diabetes.
Yep.
Just real quick, when you go through the evidence, overwhelmingly beneficial. It's almost impossible to find scientific evidence showing harm of oatmeal, even in populations where you might think, like even in there's trials looking at diabetics given oatmeal, and you still see improvement in metrics. So just as a sort of a quick pass, scientific evidence is overwhelmingly supportive of oatmeal as a food. I don't think that everybody needs to eat oatmeal. I think eggs can be part of a healthy diet. Again, depending who you are and your needs, I think you could even some people could do better on eggs. Some people could do better on oatmeal. It can be personalized. But this idea that oatmeals are poison, it's so popular with influencers. It's always based on a study they didn't read or some theory that they have that you then look into studies. It's the opposite. I've had the entire debates over this. So it's just a very common go-to for influencers. For some reason, this is very popular to say oats are poison, seed oils are poison. There's a couple of things that are very viral buttons. So
Yes.
influencers often hit those. But yeah, it doesn't really pan out.
No, and that again, now remember, I came from the paleo community, and I was one of those people years ago going, "Oh, oats are bad. Grains, all grains are bad." Now I was like, "Wow, I'm able to eat oat bran. I don't do well with the oats, but I do well with oat bran just a couple times a week, and I have seen levels in my blood work adjust that blew my mind. And that was the only dietary change. That was the only change I made because I'll try these different things in certain amounts, certain times, so that I can see what exactly is happening with myself. And it just blew my mind that I was able to bring in something like that. Wild rice. Again, like these are all things that I was not allowed to eat for 10, 12 years. Beans. God, I make a great white bean focaccia bread now, like with all beans and a little bit of coconut flour. And we just miss out on so many of these nutrients because this fear is built in and people are buying into it. And I see when I looked, because I always go right to the comments section. I listen to some of these, and I'm going to see whatever, if anybody else is thinking like I'm doing, like this is BS. And under Hyman's that day, I remember people saying, "That's right, oats. Why do you think it's only horses should be eating oats? We're not mean to eat this." I'm going, but I have people thriving on this stuff. Why do we not just look at the individual now? Because I say I had to literally eat crow when I started with the pH 360 and the genetics and see that, holy cow, we are all different. What's right for one isn't for the other. And some people thrive on eggs and some cannot do eggs to save their life. Like you said, it's all, I love how you just really say it's personal. It's all, we're all different. Now, the last one, you just touched on it. So we're going there. Seed oils, the antichrist of the food, right?
Yeah, this is another hot button for influencers, and people get so emotional over this. Again, and with this, again, there's nuance because it depends if you're asking most of the seed oils that the average American, for example, eats. Yeah, they're not the best source because they're getting those seed oils in ultra processed foods, in kind of junk food, or they're going to Burger King for that's what they're getting their seed oil. So yeah, the food they're getting their seed oils in is not health promoting, but that's a different story from saying seed oils are harmful. The truth is, when you look at the scientific evidence on seed oils, overwhelmingly they show benefit to safety. There's very little signal of harm for, and this is across the board, for heart health, for liver, for cancer. We don't see much of a signal either way in humans. For glucose metabolism, depending what you're comparing the seed oils to, you either see not much difference or a benefit, particularly if you're comparing it to saturated fat rich foods. So butter or coconut oil or something like that compared to, say, canola oil or another type of seed oil. Very consistently in randomized trials, you will see your cardiovascular markers improve. Your glucose markers either stay similar on both arms or they are slightly better on the seed oil. The liver fat consistently lower on the seed oils, on the unsaturated fats compared to the saturated. And by the way, I didn't grow up eating seed oils. It's not part of my culture. And I had no opinion on this, but I started going over because viewers would ask this, what about seed oils? Are they inflaming everyone? Are they killing everyone? I started going over the literature, and it was just such a contrast between what in tests giving to human beings and looking at the health effects versus the stampede on social media. The fear mongering is just out of control. So that's kind of the general picture. And again, there's nuance there, right? Depending on the source of the seed oil. Yeah, if you're getting them from a junk food, don't do that. I also wouldn't recommend. So people talk about, oh, but heated versus raw seed oil is different. I wouldn't be surprised. We don't have a lot of data on cooked seed oils or heated seed oils, especially different degrees, because it's one thing to say cook with seed oils at home. So you saute something in seed oils or you put some seed oils on your salad. That's one world. And then another thing is you go to Burger King and they're deep frying the same batch of oil 10 times over a week for God knows 10 hours, 20 hours total that oil is being fried. Is that going to destroy the oil? That wouldn't surprise me at all. Can that cause some harm by itself? Very possible. So again, it depends in what context you're eating the food, but adding some canola oil to a salad or sauteing something in seed oil, we sometimes do it. We have some canola oil. Mostly we use olive, but I'll sometimes use canola because the evidence on canola is overwhelmingly beneficial. We have a couple. We have a couple videos where we did an extensive search just across every kind of outcome, I don't think I could find a single study, and I think we covered 50 studies or so in that video, like dozens. I don't remember a single study that pointed to harm in human beings of canola oil on any metric. I'm trying to remember if there was an exception. Usually there's an outlier in a field, but I don't remember there being an outlier for canola. So, yeah,
Wow.
and again, they're not necessary, right? They're not essential. You can totally have a healthy diet without seed oils. So nobody needs to worry about that. If you're scared of seed oils, if you'd rather not, if you don't eat them, you don't have to go eat seed oils. So nobody's pushing them on you. But
And
this,
nobody's trying, yeah,
yeah,
no, but nobody's trying to, we're trying to stop the irrational fears and put like actual information out there.
the fairy tales. And the
Yeah.
problem with the fairy tales is usually telling people that seed oils are bad for you is not necessarily a big deal. Nutritionally, it's not a huge question. For example, if you go, oh, I'd rather not, I'll just play safe and go olive oil instead. No problem. There's no problem. The problem is the same folks that will feed you this worldview based on a misunderstanding of science will always feed you other myths and other untruths because that's how they see the world. It's based on what they heard from another influencer, or seed oils weren't around 10,000 years ago, so they must be bad for you. This type of reasoning, or the factory looks disgusting, so they must be bad for you. This type of emotional logic. So right after they tell you the seed oil is the worst fat possible, they'll give you all kinds of other stuff that is also not based on anything factual. And that's where they get you in trouble. And don't eat seed oils. Eat lard all day long. Oh, but
Yep.
what if my ApoB is through the roof? Oh, that doesn't matter. All the doctors, all cardiologists are wrong.
That's why we're doing this, because that sadly is a reality at this point. And I'm seeing the reality in my practice. That's why I'm going, we have to stop. We have to stop putting out so much misinformation to just create fear. I have clients that are afraid to breathe because there's toxins. And I'm going, I've had a couple of people, toxin experts, and I'm like, don't stress, just do the best you can. To worry about every little thing. I have to detox. I have to get rid of this. I have to get rid of this. When you feed the body,
do that for you.
that's what I said. We are set up to do it. Just quit feeding it. Quit feeding it this, the phones, the right, constant stimulation, being indoors, sitting all the time. Stop feeding it these things, and you're going to be able to detox from everything else. Because some of these, and I can't remember, this is terrible. I can't remember which guest it was even talking about that. And I've said, my God, this is brilliant, that these are things that are so incredibly toxic that we just keep having more and more and more of. But yet fearing every little piece about your food. I look at my labs. I did my True Diagnostics epigenetic age test. And in the 4 years that had passed since I did it the last time, I'm aging even slower. Am I on every single supplement? Nope. Do I eat organic chicken every single time? No, I can't afford to do it every single time, but I do eat my wild caught fish. So we make the trade-offs where we can, and yet my pace of aging is still slow. My labs I don't act my age. I function pretty incredibly well for a 60-year-old woman, right? With
60?
yes.
I thought you were in your 40s.
Gil, you are my new BFF.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would never have guessed. I thought I thought you were younger than me.
Yeah, there's wrinkles. I don't know why this screen is, I don't know, but there's wrinkles. There's crow's feet and some wrinkles, trust me. But yes, and again, thank you. But I think again, it's how we live our lives and getting movement that works for us at the right time, eating the right foods at the right time, like paying attention to that chronobiology. That's where it all comes in, because the fear mongering is making people worse. They're so
Yeah.
freaking stressed out because they're afraid to do anything. They're afraid to go outside because there's bad people outside. But yet, and then they cover up with so much of the toxic sunblock. They're not even getting the sun. I I could keep going. My one question on the seed oils though is, and this comes up on my DNA panel under polyunsaturated fats. So we look at omega-3 and omega-6 propensities, and ELOVL, FADS, TNF comes in there again. And so I see more people than not who have a higher risk of inflammation with higher amounts of omega-6s. Now that would be where your seed oils come in.
Yeah.
So could that be where some of that inflammation is coming from? It's not the seed oil itself, but it's their genetic predisposition that could be creating some issue with seed oils for that specific person. Could that potentially be anything?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out the possibility that there's a specific genetic propensity. In general, and we have a video going over this, so the general question, are seed oils inflammatory? We went over dozens of trials and also some of the longer observational studies. So in general, we don't see a pro-inflammatory signal for seed oils. If anything, some studies suggest lower inflammatory markers on more omega-6, but that's a bit debated. So in general, I would say no clear signal. Now, this is general population. Then in that video we covered, there is one study that looked at different genetics, so the fads that you mentioned. And for people listening, I don't know if your viewers are familiar with this. We're not talking about fad as in a trend. We're talking about
It's a gene.
a gene that's called, it's an acronym, right?
Good
So
point.
they looked at a couple of variants of that, and they still couldn't find a statistically significant increase in inflammatory markers, even in the variant, in the folks with the genetic variant that you would think would give them the propensity for
Yeah.
inflammation with more omega-6. So from the data we haven't seen that signal clearly. Now, I would not rule out that someone with some genetic propensity that hasn't been, or some genetic composition that hasn't been tested, could have increased inflammatory markers on omega-6s. The distinction I would make, or the caveat, would be what we talked about. Often people who are eating a lot of omega-6s, it's not the best sources, right? So it's omega-6s from these ultra processed kind of fast food type sources. And so you have a couple of things going on at the same time. You have more omega-6s, but you might also have more junk food, more calories. So it's always difficult at an anecdotal level to separate. But at an individual level, if the person wants to experiment and reduce omega-6s and increase omega-3s, for example, because omega-3s are anti-inflammatory, that's well established.
Yes, there's our protective.
That's
Yep.
not a problem. If the person wants to do that experiment, yeah, at an individual level, I think it's theoretically possible. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about omega-3s, so you just hit on that, and they're hugely beneficial.
Yeah, yeah.
Most of my clients, probably every one of them, is using an omega-3 or is get them eating some fish and a couple times a week, and we see huge changes. And some of that's genetically driven. Again, it doesn't matter. Like, your genetics are probabilities and propensities. It's what you're doing in your everyday life. It could be your sleep that's driving that genetic expression, not
Sure.
just what you're taking in. Is there anything else burning on your mind, that any myths out there that you're just like, one last thing I want to get out there because I want to be respectful of your time, because I know it's
Well,
zero dark 30.
there's so many, as we talked, there's so many things that we talked about. We could have gone into more detail. So the HDL that you mentioned, I guess still, so HDL doesn't offer any protection per se. That's important to emphasize that. So we have a lot of studies of genetics and pharmacological, all kinds of interventions changing HDL levels. It doesn't really lower risk. So that's something
Really?
yeah, HDL per se doesn't lower risk. So for example, if your ApoB is high, HDL being high, that's not lowering your risk. It's not offsetting anything. Now, what the HDL sometimes is a reflection of some things that are good. So people who exercise more tend to have higher HDL, right? People who are leaner tend to have higher HDL. If you have diabetes, HDL is lower. So it sometimes is a reflection of these things, but it's not reliable because there are many other factors that also affect HDL, including genetics. Some people just have higher HDL or lower HDL, and it's not necessarily a good thing. So the HDL, I would say, similar to your LDL, but even more caution, and in the sense that it can give you kind of a very, very, very dirty first pass. So just a red flag. If your HDL is low and your triglycerides are very high, often those people have insulin
Insulin
resistance,
resistance.
prediabetes, diabetes, they're overweight, diet is not good, they don't exercise. So these things are usually there together. But at an individual level, you could have a low HDL and you could be a healthy individual. That's perfectly possible. And you could have a high HDL and you could be at a very high risk of heart disease. So careful with the HDL. The paleo thing I think is really funny because, first of all, I think you can eat a paleo diet that is healthy. I think it's perfectly possible.
Agree.
You could put it together. You could have some leaner meats, or have some chicken breast or some fatty fish as your kind of protein component, and you could have some green vegetables. So that could be, I think you can put together a healthy paleo diet. But I would be careful with the fat bombs that you mentioned, especially if someone has
Uh,
hyperlipidemia. So you're a perfect
ah,
example of someone who probably shouldn't be going for those things.
no.
Um,
7 years fat bomb free, Gil.
yeah, and it's funny that I've interviewed in that paleoanthropologists, so people who study ancestor diets for a living, and I've read. I think it's a fascinating field that I've read a lot of studies that these people publish. Grains were eaten during the Paleolithic by humans. Legumes, you mentioned beans, that we couldn't touch beans. Legumes were eaten during the Paleolithic. Now, we have no idea how much, you know, regions, some ate, some didn't.
Sure.
There's a variation, all kinds of question marks. But yes, we know that whole grains, oats go back, I think, 50,000 years, something like that.
Wow.
Sorghum, I think, is the longest, the oldest that I've seen is, I believe, sorghum goes back over 100,000 years. So it's almost the kind of in the range of the age of our species. And I interviewed a guy who is one of the world leaders in studying ancestor diets, and he said it probably goes back much further. It's just that it's really hard to get remains from 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 a grain like that that's preserved for 100,000 years. But yeah, but in that field, people, it's pretty well accepted that our ancestors would eat these things if they were available. If they could get them, they would eat them. So they
Yep.
ate what they could find, was the bottom line of that guy.
Hunt and gather, whatever was out there, right? Because you couldn't
Yeah,
hop in your car and go to King Supers. It's just
you can't
what
choose
was
too
here.
much. Live in the wilderness. You can't be picky.
I interviewed a guy last year, Travis Holzam. Maybe it was almost 2 years ago. But he works with creating in your backyard or whatever you have available self-sustainable, right? So you can go in that backyard and pick whatever it is you need. You have everything, so you don't have to be running to the grocery store to gather up what you need. You actually have it and what
Nice.
works for you and in your climate. And that's with my profile, it when we're doing the questionnaire to create this profile with the PH360, it asks, where do you live? And so, what does it matter? It matters because of the climate, because your body is going to act different in different climates. And so it adjusts accordingly with the types of foods. Are you living somewhere where it's hot and humid all the time and you need cooling foods? Are you living somewhere, I'm in Colorado, it gets cold? Not this year, but typically it gets cold. So everything changes. And we're buying things that are summer fruits to eat in the winter, and our bodies are like, yeah, this doesn't really sit well with me. And we wonder why don't I feel that great when I'm eating this and I eat it all the time, but yet I never feel really good. So we can just be feeding these things. We have to think about, where do we live, what time of year it is, and relax into it instead of stressing about it all the time, which is just creating more inflammation from all the stress, and the brain doesn't shut off, and then people don't sleep, and then they're even worse. So yeah, it's just this fun cycle that just keeps on going. So went just like I thought it was going to go. I was so excited to have you on because I knew you would knock this out of the park and just give the reality of what we're hearing and not the agendas that just keep getting pushed out there, because majority of these people out there, and I'm going to say it, I don't care, bring on the haters, they're selling things. They're selling supplements. They're selling, yeah, I sell a coaching program if you want to work with me, but that's not why I do this podcast. I bring information so that you can make the best choices moving forward. If you need my help, I'm here, but I don't have a product, a supplement line. I don't sell, you can get this blood work done for this price. And there's agendas that are being pushed, and it's all about the dollar. How can we make the most money off of people? And now I want to have you on. If you would be willing to come back on, I want to hear your take, because I think I remember you doing a podcast. Now I can't remember, on GLP-1s. Have you?
We have a video or two, yeah, on that. Yes.
I thought so. I'd like to do a realistic, deeper dive into that with you at some point, if you'd be willing to come back and chat.
I also, yeah, I'm down to do it. And I know doctors who are specialized in obesity medicine, who work with GLP-1 agonists all day long, who know that stuff inside and out. If you're interested in talking to someone with that expertise,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah. Again, that there's no agenda. They're not trying to sell. Come to our hormone chop shop. We'll give you the latest and greatest to drop those 10 pounds by this shot. But I just, again, I love to hear every side, because we need to be able to make up our own minds and not just blindly follow an influencer, but to, like, you give out the information so that people can make the best educated decisions. And that's why I wanted you on here. So thank you for coming on and doing just that for my listeners and for me today. Because I wrote down some notes. I'm like, I'm even learning some stuff here today, and I love it. So it's new things that have opened up for me. So if someone wants to reach out to you or start following you on YouTube, again, you have so many great videos out there. How can they find you? And we'll have this in the show notes as well, but what's the best way?
Nutrition Made Simple on YouTube is the best way to find. It's the main hub. And then I'm on other people who don't watch YouTube, but we're on most social media. So I'm on Twitter, or I guess it's X now. If you search Nutrition Made Simple on Google, you'll find us. And we just started Instagram and TikTok.
Oh, fantastic. And I know you're on Facebook, because that's how I messaged you.
Yes,
So
I have a Facebook page where all the videos are posted for people who prefer to look on Facebook. That works as well, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, everybody, I want you to share this video, because let's start getting real information out there so that your friends and your loved ones can make the best decisions with their health moving forward. And follow Gil for more great information on every topic. It's out there. And when you see some big social media posts come up, go watch him, because he'll tell you if it's on point or not. I promise you. So thank you so much for listening. Get out there, make it a great day, and be your most authentic self.
Thank you for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who'd find the information useful. Please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it'll help the information get out to others. If you're interested in seeing if we're a great fit to work together, the link is in the show notes below, where you can sign up for a free consultation with me. So go make it a great day and let your authentic self shine.